So some of you may know that I grew up just outside of Detroit, which means that I've eaten a lot of Detroit-style pizza. And even though I don't live there anymore, Detroit-style pizza will always have a special place in my heart. I mean, it's what started my love for pizza. So because of that, I've made it my mission to recreate an authentic version at home. And I'm not gonna stop until I get there. But first, I need to take a trip back to Detroit to refresh my memory. And I'm gonna start with the original Detroit-style pizza at Buddy's. And we're actually at the original location here on 6 Mile. There's a little bit of construction, so hopefully the audio isn't too bad. But of the place we're gonna go today, this is the only one that I've actually had before, but I've had quite a bit of Buddy's in my day. And I actually got 2 pizzas, but I'm gonna start here with, I guess, what would be the most traditional for Detroit style pizza, which is just cheese and pepperoni. Yeah, so it's got that classic Buddy's taste that I know. Maybe a little bit of a thinner crust than it sometimes is when I go here, but definitely a really solid pizza. And really, when you talk about Detroit style pizza, you're essentially talking about Buddy's. And really, there are 3 sort of non-negotiable things when it comes to Detroit style pizza. The first is that it's a rectangular pizza cooked in a blue steel pan, which, as I'm sure you've heard before, are the pans that they used to use in the auto industry for holding things like nuts and bolts. And one day someone decided to bake a pizza in it, and the Detroit style pizza was born. The second thing is that it uses Wisconsin brick cheese, and the cheese is spread all the way to the edges to get that nice little crispy border created by that hot pan. Then the third thing is that the sauce has to go on top of the cheese. That allows the sort of greases and flavors from the cheese to soak into the dough as it bakes. And if you don't have that, it really can't be considered a Detroit style pizza, at least according to most people that you would ask. Now, there are a few other sort of optional or debatable things, which we'll get into in more detail once we visit these next few places. But let's try this other pizza that I got here at Buddy's. So this is what they call their Detroiter, and in addition to the typical brick cheese and sauce, it's also got a little bit of Parmesan cheese, along with their Sicilian spice blend, and you can see that they put the pepperonis on top on this one, instead of underneath the cheese like what they did with the classic slice. So I never tried this particular pizza before, but I actually do like it a lot better than the original. The Sicilian spice blend adds a nice flavor. I don't know exactly what's in it, I'll have to do some more research. I'm guessing thyme and just some other Italian spices. But the Parmesan cheese adds a nice flavor as well. Pepperoni on top too gives it sort of a more distinctive, almost a little bit charred flavor. But again, we'll talk more about that as we go to these next few places. Alright, so we're here at Loui's Pizza, and it's actually a place started by one of the original longtime cooks at Buddy's. And first impressions of the pizza, you can see it's got a lot more cheese and a lot more sauce than the pizza at Buddy's. Definitely not quite as much browning on the top either, but those edges look even crispier. So I'm very curious to give it a try. A lot of cheese. So normally I don't like my pizzas with a lot of cheese, but this is actually really good. It's quite thin actually for Detroit style, but the dough has a great flavor to it. It's got that really nice crispness on the edges. The sauce has a perfect balance between sweet and tangy, and the spice blend they use is a nice touch as well. Definitely some oregano in there, but it seems pretty similar to that Sicilian spice blend that they use at Buddy's. And again, the pepperonis are under the cheese, which is something that we'll touch on again at this next place. So let's head over there. Alright, so we're at a place called Cloverleaf, and it's raining outside, so we're just gonna do an in-car review here. Basically, the original owner of Buddy's, Gus Guerra, ended up leaving Buddy's after not too long, and he started this as his own place. So they claim to be the original Motor City Square, as it says on the sign, even though they weren't actually the first Detroit-style pizzeria. Just looking at it though, it looks pretty promising. Definitely the crispest of all the slices I've tried so far. In terms of the cheese to sauce ratio, it looks to be pretty similar to Buddy's, but let's give it a try. Again, pretty thin compared to what I'm typically used to, but flavor-wise it's pretty solid. The sauce has a great flavor on it. Personally, I would prefer a little bit more, and that crispness is really nice as well. Really, my biggest problem with it is that I just like it to be a little bit airier. I think that was one thing Buddy's did have going for it compared to the other 2 places. Now, the other thing I mentioned though is the pepperonis. Obviously, you can see here they put the pepperonis on top of the pizza, and this is sort of a hot topic of debate when it comes to Detroit-style pizza. Buddy's says that the pepperoni should go directly on top of the dough, so that the fats and juices sort of seep into the dough as it bakes. Obviously, the problem with that though is that you don't get the charring and crispness on the top of the pepperonis. So for me, honestly, you could go either way. I kind of do prefer the charring on the top of the pepperonis. But anyways, now that we visited these classic spots, I think it's time to check out a more modern take on this style of pizza. But first we need to talk about today's sponsor, Viome. Because with all this pizza I'm eating, I need to make sure that I'm keeping my gut healthy, which I can do with help from Viome's gut intelligence test. Because science has shown that poor gut health can lead to all sorts of other health issues. Inflammation, weight gain, bloating, energy levels, sleep quality, even your mood and mental clarity can be affected. Fortunately though, they can largely be remedied just by eating the right foods. And that's where Viome comes in. They'll ship the test straight to your door, then all you need to do is register the test and take a quick sample, then ship the test back for free, and within 2 to 3 weeks, you'll get your results via the Viome app. It'll provide you with over 20 gut health scores, including things like digestive efficiency, inflammatory activity, and gut lining health. Plus, it'll give you personalized nutrition recommendations, revealing superfoods specific to you, along with some foods that you should consume less of or avoid altogether. I'm hoping that one of my superfoods is pizza. And as a special offer for my viewers, Viome is offering $110 off your test. Just go to tryviome.com/CharlieAnderson and use the code Charlie110. You can click the link in my description or use the QR code on the screen. So thanks again to Viome for sponsoring this video, and thank you for your support. Now, let's eat some more pizza. All right, so this next pizza is from a place called Michigan in Trumbull. It's a little bit of a newer place. I believe they opened originally in 2017, and just visually it looks pretty promising. Seems like they try to do sort of a more artisan take on the Detroit style pizza. They didn't have just a plain pepperoni pizza on the menu, so I actually got the margarita, which as you can see comes with basil and Parmesan cheese on top. So quite a bit different than the others that I've tried. The crust is definitely my favorite so far. It's super light and spongy, but it's still got that nice crispness on the exterior. Pretty sparsely topped with cheese as well. Honestly, the cheese to sauce ratio is pretty much spot on for me. I do think I preferred the flavor of the sauce at Louis. I think those additional Italian herbs they included, at least for me, do kind of define a Detroit style pizza. They definitely seem to be using higher quality ingredients here though, and overall, I think it's my favorite that I've tried so far. But we still have one more place to visit. All right, so last slice of the day here at a place called Grandma Bob's, downtown Detroit. Another one looks a little more kind of artisan, a little bit of a thicker crust, nice crispiness on the outside. As you can see, it's a pepperoni slice. They actually put Mike's Hot Honey on it as well, and I think a little bit of Parmesan. So let's give it a try. This one's really good as well. It's super nice, airy crust, really soft interior, but again with that crispness on the exterior. To me, it has that more kind of iconic Detroit style flavor. Maybe it's because of the pepperoni. To me, this is kind of like the perfect Detroit style slice, but it's just basically a really good version of it. So I think after trying all these pizzas, we got what we need here. Let's head back to the lab and work on this recipe. And the absolute most important thing when it comes to Detroit style pizza is the pan. This is what gives you that crispy cheese edge that Detroit style pizza is known for, along with the crispness and browning on the edges and bottom as the dough sort of fries up in this oiled pan. So this is one I've had for a while. It's from a brand called Loui pans, which is pretty much the gold standard when it comes to Detroit style pizza pans. This is the 8x10 inch size, which was the size of all the pizzas I tried on my trip, but it also comes in a 10x14 inch size. So that's what you get if you ordered a large pizza. For me though, this one will be plenty big, and I actually bought 2 more so that I can do some side-by-side testing as I'm working on this recipe. So let's talk about that, because the pizzas I tried on this trip were actually all pretty different, and there were a lot of things that I liked about them, but also some parts that I didn't like. So like we talked about, Buddy's is the original Detroit style pizza, and it's really what this entire style of pizza stemmed from, but it's not necessarily the best version of it today. Especially the pizza I got on this trip, it was a bit disappointing. Nothing really stood out about it, about the flavor, and the crust too was just a little bit too dense and too flat. So with that said, let me build my ideal Detroit style pizza based on everything I learned on this trip. And easily my favorites in terms of dough were Michigan and Trumbull and Grandma Bob's. They were both so much lighter and spongier than the rest, with just the right thickness and a much more interesting flavor. A lot of the original places like Buddy's actually use a same day dough, and so they don't develop that same flavor that you would with a multiple day fermentation. So for my pizza, my ultimate goal will be to make the lightest and airiest dough I possibly can with the best sort of bready, fermenty flavor. Now in terms of the cheese, we already know that the main cheese for Detroit style pizza needs to be Wisconsin brick cheese, which is basically like a richer and slightly tangier alternative to mozzarella. There are a few other cheeses that could be blended in with the brick cheese, like the Fontanella or Asiago that Buddy's uses in their Motor City cheese blend. So I'm definitely going to play around with those as well, but there is one thing that I know for sure, and that is that I really like the addition of Parmesan on top that a few places added, and it seems to be relatively traditional, so I think I'm going to go with that as well. But now let's talk sauce. And I actually think the best sauce I had on this trip was from Louis. It had a nice natural sweetness to it, so I could tell that they used high quality tomatoes, but what really stood out to me about it was the tanginess. Since Detroit style sauce is usually cooked, a lot of times you lose out on too much of that tanginess. But I don't think a completely raw sauce is the right move either. That's what they seemed to do at Michigan and Trumbull, at least on the margarita pizza that I ordered, and it definitely didn't have the right flavor profile for a Detroit style pizza. I think Louis sauce was just slightly cooked to to bring out some of the sweetness from the tomatoes without losing too much acidity. So that's what I'm gonna try for as well. And it also had a really nice spice blend with things like oregano, thyme, and garlic, sort of similar to what Buddy's use in their Sicilian spice blend. And to me, that's another thing that really defines the flavor of a classic Detroit style pizza. Now last but not least though, let's talk about toppings. Because unlike some styles of pizza, the most classic Detroit style pizza is actually not just a plain cheese. It's actually pepperoni. The big question though is whether the pepperoni should go directly on top of the dough to sort of infuse that oily flavor into the crust, or whether they should go on top of the entire pizza to sort of crisp and char as they bake. Honestly, I think both ways seem to be valid, so that's something I'm just gonna have to test out and see what I like best. So I think it's time to get started.